Bad Life Podcast! You are listening to the Bad Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of the Band Life Podcast. I am your host, Pete Stannard, and I'm here with my beautiful co-host, the Wizard of Rock himself, Mr. Adam West. How are you today, my friend? It is good to see you.
Hot and sweaty. My balls are really warm.
You should invest in some crotchless pants.
Mate, I got these big baggy, what they call them, like hippie type trousers on, right? But
are they like MC Hammer trousers?
yes, that's exactly what they're like. They're those funky trousers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I quite literally don't touch this.
See?
Get
Get a load of that, boy.
For those listening, it is very MC Hammer.
I look like I've been to a Glastonbury
Adam
festival.
is going to stop and do some hammer time for us at some point.
But yeah, I got the fan on, but it's absolutely sweltering in here. I'm really, really warm. Other than that, I'm rather good, sir. Rather good. What about you? What about your good self?
Good. I'm good. I'm enjoying the hot weather, especially in my lovely studio, which has no windows or anything. So it's nice and cool.
Why has your studio got no windows?
So it's nice. Because windows inhibit sound. It's not the best thing for sound. If you go into a recording studio that has lots of windows, kind of be a little bit like, why is there windows? Because generally it's kind of a weak spot for erroneous sounds coming in.
Well, that's true.
But also it's very reflective of sound waves because it's a very sort of sheer, dense material, glasses. So sound waves bounce off them very, very easily. So things, especially things like bass and stuff like that in the lower frequencies, they also bounce around the room in ways that you don't want. That's why generally recording studios don't have windows. We should talk about this because I was actually a little bit skeptical about doing this topic because when I first thought of it, I was like, is this something we want to do? But then what I did, so I thought, what I do is I'll put this out on Threads and I'll see if I get anything back. And I did, got loads of responses.
Good.
I got one idiot. Loads of responses.
Not true.
Basically, I questioned, I put the question slightly differently on Threads. I said, has every song ever been written? Like, you can't really write a new song sort of thing. But basically just one sentence saying, has every song ever been written? The first response I get back is, what do you mean by written? Okay, here we go.
1 hour later.
This is not a good start. I was like, well, when I say written, I mean written, as in the past tense of writ. As in, the artist has written the song, it's been produced, it's been released. It is done.
Why am I wasting my time with dicks like you? Piss off.
Exactly. She got into a whole thing of, well, obviously like the complexities of songs, and you're obviously like you just like complex songs, and and all the rest. I'm just like, look, I'm not invalidating simplistic songs or complex songs. I'm just literally asking the question: why do modern day songs in particular? Why are they so simplistic? Why is that the onus of the industry at the moment, sort of thing? And okay, I didn't hear anything beyond that. Huh. So, Because I put things like, I don't appreciate you presuming that that's something that I would anyway.
Well, so the woke crowd were in there, were they? The woke crowd were in there, were they?
The woke crowd. I don't know what I don't know where she was coming from the beginning. To be brutally honest, with what do you mean by written sort of thing? So, but everyone else on there was actually really good. There were a couple of jokey ones. Someone put done. That's my song. We're done.
Nobody wanted to be professional.
But other people said. Other people were like, well, actually, if you look at it from a mathematical perspective, if you look at it from a linguistic perspective and things like that, the combinations are infinite. And that was fair play, I thought. The question on this topic, I wanted to do something a bit more about songwriting because, well, this is the most important factor to any music business at the end of the day. If you are a music artist, the songs are important, and without them, we have nothing, really, at the end of the day.
That's true.
Good. So, generally, people want to have successful songs. They want people to listen to their songs, and they want to gain an audience and a fan base and all that sort of stuff. Yep, good. I'm glad we're on that page. So I thought what we should do is look at successful songs. Start with a really kind of a good song from my kind of era, I suppose, or our era, would be "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana. If you don't know that song, Google it. I'd be very surprised if you don't know "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana. But anyway, it launched their career. It launched grunge in that era. Mm-hmm. It also launched alternative music as well in ways that had never been launched before. I mean, the Nevermind album knocked Michael Jackson off the Billboard charts, something that he wasn't very happy about.
Yeah, well, that one really, he kind of, he was at the forefront of most things in the 90s with his music anyway, wasn't he?
So late 80s into the 90s.
Yeah,
was his heyday, I suppose. The king of pop himself to knock him off the Billboard charts, especially a tiny little band from Seattle as well, who were pretty much unknown before then. Quite an achievement, I think. So, and kind of if you don't quite get the gravitas of how this song shaped the industry as well, because before the grunge explosion in the early 90s, there really, especially in the States, there really wasn't any notable alternative radio stations. There were about 15 countrywide in the States, which is a tiny amount. Especially in the state, I think there's more radio stations in like New York than that. Anyway, once the grunge thing, the alternative scene exploded in the way that it did worldwide, that alternative radio scene exploded with it. So you went from having 15 stations to literally thousands of stations. One of the things that happened in the States in 96, Bill Clinton brought in a thing called the Telecommunications Act, which was supposed to be an act that kind of tempered the market for the internet, because broadband was a new technology coming in the late 90s. And what it was supposed to do was control the amount of companies providing that service. Cynics of the act think that it was big communication companies trying to monopolize an industry. The issue with it was that radio is considered to be a part of telecommunication. All of these thousands of new radio stations had to then be merged, or they had to sell up and move on, which became a bit of a thing in the music industry because the underground feeds into the mainstream, and the alternative stations and the kind of college radio stations and things like that, that's where independent and unknown artists get their breaks. And when they don't exist anymore, it becomes a bit of an issue because major labels, they're really, really bad at finding new good artists to work with. It's always been this feeding of artists from the independents or the underground into the majors.
Yeah, so it's a factory line.
And that's why we've got this problem now. Yeah, that's why we've got this problem now where if you blow up on TikTok, you're probably going to get a record deal from a major label. And then 2 months later, they'll drop you because you're not being viral. Something like that. Because we've lost all of these alternative stations and stuff like that, major labels are kind of a little bit like, well, where are we going to find our next big thing? How is that going to work? And in a roundabout way, social media has filled that void. And they're kind of, the problem that I think the problem with that is that they're signing artists that don't have a fan base. They don't have they have a viral following ship, I suppose, on social media, but they don't have a fan base because they haven't done the sorts of fundamental stuff that we've talked about in previous episodes, like the music business mindset, which I think is episode 4, and the music business ecosystem episode, which was episode 6, I think. Because they haven't got those fundamentals in place, what happens is they end up with a bad deal and they end up getting dropped. And it's one of the issues that I feel the industry has is that there's the most people are consuming via Spotify or something like that, and the majors control the streaming sites at the end of the day. You've got to be quite naive to think that they don't. There's a much wider discussion here to be had about why songs blow up in the way they do and how songs blow up in the way they do. So I want to ground this conversation more in actual songwriting and quality of songs.
Sure.
So I'm going to bring it back round. I kind of draw it back into Nirvana again, okay? So the reason that I'm asking is for this topic is, are all the best songs already written?
Yes.
What do you think, Mr. West? Are they already done? Are they gone? Can we not write anything new?
I think we can, but like you said earlier on, there's a lot of music. Since we're both musicians, we'll both know this as well. Most songs really work off a set of between four to 5 chords, and that's it. It's how you use those chords, generally in the sort of the pop music where it's very predominant. I've seen a chap online. He plays a keyboard and he's selling his lessons. And he's like, did you know you could play most songs just by these 4 chords? And he's obviously talking to himself, and he's like, no, get out of there. So he goes, can you feel the love? That's 1 chord. And then straight from that, he goes into an Elton John song, and then he goes into something, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's interesting. And I was like, okay, so there's, at least in the indie and the pop industry, probably why a lot of songs actually do well and work is because they're based on the 4 major chords. And I suppose as long as you've got a good hook lyrically and musically to make it work, then it will work. And I don't think it will ever stop working, because if you've got 4 basic chords that, like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of artists are using to write memorable songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit or Don't Look Back in Anger and all that sort of stuff, by Oasis, then I think, okay, well then then in theory it should still work. So have all the best songs been written? No, I don't think they have. What's changed is the status quo, I think, in terms of what people are aspiring to, especially with the sudden burst of music that pops up on Instagram and TikTok. I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying before. A lot of it's very, very saturated. It's like, I think people are going after the same thing. It's like a huge race, isn't it, for the front line? And as a result, they've really sort of haven't put the brakes on and looked at what they're doing and thought to themselves, it's not about, is it quantity or context? It's like, I think they've lost their way, you know, which is why a lot of music that I've heard is very boring. And I think people, like we said before, I think people just have really forgotten. They're too preoccupied with being number one, like you said, and getting out there and writing something new. And it's like, I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think all the best songs have been written, but I really think people have lost their way, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, because even if you take a song like "Smells Like Teen Spirit," I Nirvana, when they used to play it live, they would start playing "More Than a Feeling" by Boston and go into "Smells Like Teen Spirit" because the two songs are very similar.
Yeah,
and also Dave Grohl's admitted that all of it on the Nevermind record, he ripped his drum parts from disco mainly.
Yeah.
From the Gap band, all that.
Yeah, I've seen the video.
Those flam shots and things like that. He openly admits to that. I suppose it's one thing of how, where does the line be drawn between influence and kind of tearing people off, I suppose, as it were. But there's quite a famous thing with Ed Sheeran and Marvin Gaye's, obviously now his estate, because he's passed on, that Ed Sheeran's song Thinking Aloud, they felt that there was a copyright issue with Marvin Gaye's song Let's Get It On.
Right.
They felt that he stole it. And it's a literal 4-chord progression, the song itself. And Ed Sheeran won the case mainly because his defense was that pop songs use these 4 chords all the time.
Well,
and if you're going to sue him, then he could sue anyone else that brings anything out chronologically going forward. So, and they fell on the side of Ed Sheeran at the end of the day, and I'm sure he was very happy with that. But I think it took the best part of a decade for this to be sorted. So I feel that Ed Sheeran is quite relieved that this has happened. Well, it's at least been sorted anyway. And I suppose it comes down to music now seems to be very simplistic, like 4 chords, and it's just it wasn't like that back, certainly in the 60s and 70s and the 80s and into the 90s.
You sure?
Songs were a lot more complex. Yeah, I mean, if you look at even if you look at the charts back then, there was a much more variance of genres in the charts. I looked at the current charts in 2024, and it's basically full of hip hop, dancing, kind of poppy stuff. And I looked at 1984's, and in 1984 you had Stevie Wonder, Queen, U2, your favorite artist of all time, Cyndi Lauper, Kool and the Gang. So
he's watching my video as well, though.
Which is a massive you've got rock, disco, funk, obviously pop, and a whole range of different genres within that top 10, or in the upper parts of the top 10 of that decade. Whereas now it seems to be very much either kind of dancey pop or hip hop, and not a lot in between. Maybe the odd kind of Ed Sheeran-esque, like Sam Fender sort of thing, which might be considered a bit more rocky pop, as it were. But certainly nothing like Queen or Stevie Wonder.
No, you're right.
And things like that. That have these, I mean, Stevie Wonder's stuff, really complex stuff. I mean, they, you know, like diminished, when was the last time you heard a diminished chord in a pop song? You know, it's not there anymore. So if you look at, you know, bands like even the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, obviously Stevie Wonder, but even Michael Jackson and Prince, their songs, they have different chord types, there's a lot more variance in sections.
Just to interject a minute, Pete, not to throw you off track, but I was just going to say about what you were just mentioning there. There's a reason why those songs are quite memorable, right? It's because, like, you mentioned all those, right? And almost instantly you can name a Stevie Wonder track, you can name a Michael Jackson track, and they were all quite memorable, weren't they? They had good hooks, good riffs, good lyrics, and it's like today, I got a job to remember anything anybody's singing about, because I just think they're trying too hard.
Yeah, and even if you look at, you know, even into, like, because we were talking about grunge, yeah, if you look at a song like Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden, you know, the first chord on that is a sustained chord, which isn't, you know, I mean, it's not, you know, in terms of classic songwriting, it's not considered to be massively progressive or new, but you don't get those types of chords and that type of song structure anymore, certainly in the realm of pop, as it were, or what would be considered a successful song. Taylor Swift, I've never sat down and worked out her songs, but I can't imagine her having sustained chords, diminished chords, you know, using different modal systems and things.
How dare you,
that.
Pete? She's the 8th best guitarist in the world.
Yes, clearly. You know, but if you look at, you know, certainly sort of Stevie Wonder's stuff, he's using modal systems. He's taking from jazz and using modal systems and things like that and putting it into the context of funk and that sort of thing. And it makes for a much more interesting song. But does it sell now, I suppose, is the business question behind this. Can you write those sorts of songs anymore and be successful from a business perspective?
Do people want to, though?
And I think that's the bigger question. Well, this is the thing, and this is the thing that I am actually quite interested in, because generally, from looking at a few kind of pop songs and stuff, they tend to follow a structure of a 1-4-5-6 structure, like a chord progression of 1-4-5-6, which isn't particularly complex. And if you're just doing that sort of thing, there's not really a great deal that you can do with that, because there's not a lot to work with at the end of the day. But our Spanish friends over in Spain did a study of music. What they did was, there was a study done. Do you want me to just read this to you?
Yeah, crack on, man. I'm all ears.
And the listeners. Right, so there was a study done at the Artificial Intelligence Research Institute of Spain National Research Council in Barcelona by Joan Sierra. I had to look up the Joanne bit because I wasn't sure if it was Juanan or something like that, because they pronounce their J's as a H, don't they? But apparently it's Joan Sierra. Now, Joanne found that the quality of music has declined over the years. So Joanne and his colleagues looked at 500,000 pieces of music between 1955 and 2010, running songs through a complex set of algorithm algorithms examining three aspects of those songs.
Should be good.
One is timbre, that's the sound, color, texture, and tone quality. Two was pitch, was the harmonic content of the piece, including its chords, melody, and tonal arrangements. Three was loudness, it's the volume variance, adding richness and depth. The results of the study revealed that timbral variety went down over time, meaning songs were becoming more homogeneous. That basically means most pop songs now sound the same. Timbral qualities peaked in the 1960s, which has since dropped steadily with less diversity of instruments and recording techniques. That's why I always have an array of recording techniques for me and my clients. Shameless plug.
Indeed.
We sort all that out in pre-production. Anyway, pitch has also decreased with a number of chords and different melodies declining. Pitch content has also decreased with the number of chords and different melodies declining, as musicians today are less adventurous in moving from one chord or note to another, opting for well-trod paths by their predecessors. Loudness was found to have increased by about 1 decibel every year. Music loudness has been manipulated by the use of compression. Yeah. Compression, if you don't understand what compression is, basically it makes the quieter parts the same volume as the louder parts, okay, which reduces dynamic range. So with everything now being loud, it gives music a muddled sound as everything has less punch and vibrancy due to compression. Lyric intelligence was also studied by Joanne Sierra over the last 10 years using several metrics such as, now, if I pronounce this wrong, you're going to have to forgive me.
I can't even read that.
Fleshish,
I think,
kinad readability. Flesh kinsiad readability index, some kind of readability index, which reflects how difficult a piece of text is to understand and the quality of the writing. Results showed lyric intelligence has dropped by a full grade, with lyrics getting shorter, tending to repeat the same words often. And as Adam has put, amen to that.
Yeah.
Is that an amen to that, as in you don't want any more lyrics?
No.
Or amen to that because you want more?
No, amen to the fact that I agree. I think that the quality of the lyrics have got worse over the years. If you look at the rap and hip hop genre, like anything from like I can't remember the name now. You've got Shabba Ranks, everything from Ashwad and all that sort of era. They were all singing about sort of love and like community, where it's now basically all about women, tits, ass, car, drugs, and all the negative aspects of life. And F-bombs dropped every couple of minutes. So
yeah, and I agree. Now, I occasionally get, I think we've talked about this before, I get phone calls from hip hop artists and they're always like, I need to record right now, right here, right now, sort of thing. And I'm like, I can't be in two places at once, sort of thing. But I'm always a little bit kind of dreading that it's going to be some kind of drill music that's misogynistic, it's racist, it's, you know, it's all about, you know, gangs and guns and violence and all this other stuff. And I personally, I don't want to hear it, and I don't want to work on that sort of thing. But I'm not sure what I would do if I was put into that situation of, here's the song, and if I'm hearing it for the first time through my monitor speakers, and it's that sort of thing, how I would then kind of go, I'm sorry, I can't work with you, you need to go away, sort of thing. It's kind of a difficult prospect.
Well,
to kind of think about, I suppose.
Look, I mean, I get it. I know life is bad and a bit shit for some people.
But anyway, let's try to circle this back to the songs themselves, okay? after reading this this study that they did in Spain, I thought, well, what could be causing this decline in music in this way? And I thought, well, maybe it's just an educational thing. So I had a look at the education of music in schools, and apparently music literacy and education is down to 11%. It's just, I think that this is another big problem, is that music just isn't being taught. What happens is people want to get into music. What they do is they go and buy a guitar or whatever, and then they go on YouTube and it's just going to learn some songs, and they don't quite comprehend the theory behind why they're playing. Why are they playing this structure? Why is this chord progression? Why does it work in this way? What sort of scales are they using and things like that? How can you it's like when you said at the top of this, you've only got sort of 7 notes in a scale to work with. Well, my first reaction was that, well, actually what you can do is if you have a key change, then you've got more. If you think from a modal system, you've got a huge amount more. You've got an infinite amount of scales and tones that you can use. So having that knowledge is also going to help songwriters to create much more complex songs.
Well, they are.
But then there's the other side of it. The other side of it is that if these complex songs never get listened to, you kind of think, well, what's the point of writing them in a roundabout way?
Do it for yourself. That's what Rick Rubin says, mate. Do it for yourself.
Oh, exactly. Always. And I completely agree with Rick Rubin. I always say this to artists when they're asking me about this sort of stuff. I always say, write for yourself, produce for your audience. It's as simple as that.
I think too many people today are really writing songs for other people, and you're like, okay, if you go out there, I want to write the best song, get noticed, get tons of listens on my Spotify channel. You're like, okay, if you just wrote a song for you that you felt good about and your band members felt good about, that's probably all it is. Like, at least with what you're trying to do with this podcast, if you put some of that into practice, then maybe. Because the world of music has changed so much. It's like people, if you go back to the Nirvana thing, like I suppose with those guys, it was like, oh, we're going to write this music, we're going to bash it out in a fucking garage, and then we'll just play it to a few people. Great.
This is why I wanted to do this episode so much. Because I wanted to do an episode about music itself, about songwriting. I just didn't quite know how to frame the topic. But I think it's important to emphasize the fact that the music has to come first. Everything else is irrelevant.
I agree.
At the end of the day. That's why, like back in the ecosystem episode that we talked about the business ecosystem, I put music as the soil, because the soil is the fundamental thing that every element of that ecosystem needs. It's the earth, it's the lifeblood of your music, is the songs themselves. And if you don't have that, and if you're not working to have to your best songwriting craft abilities, then you're not going to get anywhere. You can market, you can be the best marketer in the world, you can have the greatest website in the world. If your songs suck, no one's going to listen to it. And in a roundabout way, and this is the thing that I don't like about the music industry, is that the reverse is also true. If you suck at marketing, very few people are going to listen to your music. So it comes down to what your own interpersonal goals are and what you want from your music. If your goals are purely, I want to write the best songs in the world or the best songs that I can produce, and that's all I care about, then just do that. Don't get tied up in the social media. Don't get tied up in the business element of it, because you're not going to make any money from that. Yeah, it's just, I always use this as an example, is that you can write the next Sgt. Pepper's. If it's not marketed properly, no one's going to listen to it. No one's going to hear it. It's going to fall into the ether of the internet.
Go back to the original, mate. You just write your music, you get into a venue, you play to people, pass your stuff around, done. I think that's what's sadly lacking today, because a lot of people listen to a lot of cool music and a lot of cool bands by doing that. And there you go, oh, it's copyright and this and that. And you're like, there you go, slap a little lord on it. These people didn't give a shit.
Bringing it back to the songs themselves. So I mean, looking at this from a top tier pop perspective, I mean, could this be a money issue? Okay, especially with like there's been a significant rise in artists trying to sue other artists for copyright breach. As royalties have declined over the years, is there a case to be kind of put forth for big bands that were kind of classic bands that were earning, say, $1 million in royalties a year, have seen that $1 million dwindle down and down and down because the royalty rates have dropped so much? And then what they're trying to do is compensate for that by suing people and going, well, that's my song. You've taken my song, and they're again essentially saying that's my royalty.
It's
share.
all about money, isn't it? They've forgotten, and we've lost our way. It's no longer about the music. It's like, I want to get popular, or I want to get rich, and you're like, well, you're doomed to fail then, because when it comes down to it, the crunch, you'll appreciate little bands that went, I don't give a fuck about that. I'm just going to write music, and somebody will recognise and they'll do well. And then you got the jealousy saying, what have you got that I haven't got? It's like, no, you had it, but all you craved was fame, fortune, money, and lavish, even material things. So you're like, it's doomed to fail, because you're not right. It's not about the music anymore then, is it? It just ain't.
And I suppose that kind of the counter to that would be, well, I'm not performing anymore. I'm not producing music anymore. This is my legacy. And, if I'm being ripped off in some way, then I have a legal argument to.
I'm not just
to go. I'm stretching.
No. I get it. Okay. If their situation issues, I'd be like, okay, fine, right. What's the deal here? Okay, so it looks like, for me, I always saw if somebody rips off, goes out of the way to completely copy, say, an Ed Sheeran song, and they're a different artist. Yeah. I was Ed Sheeran, I listened, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like one of my popular tracks. Okay, let's have a word with the solicitor. But if it's like if it's a chord progression that's very similar and then it alternates, you could go, okay, well, it's not a complete rip-off of the song because it's not the whole song, it's just a segment. So am I going to file for royalty rates? Look, at the end of the day, right, they've obviously probably listened to, just as an example, the Ed Sheeran song, probably gone, that's a cool riff. If I play that progression, but halfway in I go to a dissonant note, then it doesn't sound like the progression. Then I'd be like, well, what's the big deal? From a listener's perspective, I listen and go, yeah, I think you probably listened to that and pinched it a little bit. Okay, is it worth going to court over? No, I don't think so, because what made it popular was the Ed Sheeran song. What this person's done is take a little snippet and then add something else. And what you tend to find with people who do things like that is that the song ends up being a bit naff anyway, because it's like, so you've really had no, collective creative ideas there. You pinched a section of the chord on the riff and you said, with some, I'd rather listen to the Ed Sheeran stuff. Not that I will personally, because I don't like his music. But the point of this conversation would be like, well, I'd be like, and you do find this with certain bands, and you're like, yeah, that chorus there is very similar. It's like, It's not very inventive then, is it? So like out of the window, like you got to have something that's a little bit, you know what I mean?
But I suppose kind of bringing it back to sort of Smells Like Teen Spirit, for example, that is very similar to that Boston song, More Than a Feeling.
Well, yeah.
And you mentioned Oasis with Don't Look Back in Anger, which is essentially Imagine by the Beatles or John Lennon.
There you go. But I wonder how many other bands or artists have actually used material from other artists bygone, and then hope that nobody would at least know about it. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Well, the Verve did it with Bittersweet Symphony, didn't they? Which is probably their biggest song. Which the orchestra part in that song is a Rolling Stones song.
Oh, there you go. See.
And they took that and they didn't get permission for it, and the Stones sued them, and the Stones won that case. So they get all of the royalties from that song.
Well, they done well in the 90s, then, didn't they?
Yeah. They've done well. Some would say they've done well since the 60s. To be honest with you, but it's one of those things. And again, coming back to kind of the money side of it, because pop in generally artists don't write their own pop songs. They have like a staff of writers. Like Taylor Swift will say, I wrote this song, but she has, I think, about 13 songwriters in her staff. So, and she'll write like one line and then she'll be like, oh, I wrote this song. That's all she needs to get credit. Simon Cowell apparently is the worst for this. What he does when he signs someone, he'll go into the studio when everyone's gone home, go ding, or play some bizarre instrument, and that will be mixed in, and he'll get a songwriting credit for because he just put that in, that sort of thing. This is what I would kind of had a look at, and songwriters especially for pop and country music, to make any decent money, they have to have a top 40 hit. If they get a gold record, so if they sold 500,000 copies, they'll probably get around about 35 grand for the year for that. But if they hit the top 5, that's about $1 million. So the kind of the onus on writing songs that will be massively popular or massively commercialized for songwriters is it's there. The incentives are there to do that at the end of the day. So I think from a financial perspective, the onus is on writing quick and simple songs, because a lot of the times they've only got like a day to write a record, and that's it.
Should be
the record company will go, you've got today to do it, and doing anything beyond 4 chords, it's just going to be like outside the realms of possibilities. When you take like the Beatles and the Stones, they're like, well, I spent like 6 months writing this song.
This is what I want to sign,
because that's the level of detail. It's one of those things. One of the issues is that artists just aren't given enough space to write more complex songs. The other viewpoint is the audience itself. Okay, so people who casually listen to music, say, because the songs have been kind of simplified over the last 25 to 30 years, when you then expose more complex songs to people, they're probably not going to like it because it's too complex.
That's true.
So
brainwashed.
You've kind of got a little bit of an issue there of how do you then start to introduce these things into the general population. And I suppose you've also got this negative feedback loop from the audience to, certainly to the record labels, of, well, this simple 4-chord song has sold, it's a platinum disc, it sold 1 million. That's the songs that we want to put out. because that's where we're going to make out, we've invested all of this money and we need to ensure that we make that money back. We want you to put these sorts of songs out. And this takes us back to what I was talking about, the social media filling the gap that the alternative radio used to do, is that record labels are signing young artists and because they're viral, and they're dropping them because they can't reproduce that virality. And that's because they're not able to sell songs at the end of the day. And that's part of the criteria of what artists need to do when you're in that situation. It's how it works. So if you want that kind of Taylor Swift level or the Ed Sheeran level of success, as it were, if you quote unquote success, then you are going to need a record label, because the whole industry is skewed to them. They built the industry. They are the industry. So you don't see independent artists with billion streams or with 1 billion views on YouTube. Unsigned artists just don't get that. They don't get that exposure, that level of exposure. So if you want that sort of thing, you're going to have to learn to play their game by their rules. And that's kind of the cut and dry of it at the end of the day. I speak to a lot of artists who go, I want to be really successful. I'm like, okay, well, you're going to need to be more commercial. It's as simple as that. And that's going to come down to your songwriting. And, and this is what's being consumed. This is what people are listening to. They're listening to a 4-chord progression, and it's all very simple, and you're spoon feeding people a lot of the times. If you go out there and you're using sort of rare words in your lyrics, but don't people will be like, what are you talking about? Because music consumption now is geared around that. And it's not because people are stupid, less in tune with their music. It's that they just haven't had that level of exposure. If all you listen to is Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran, when you hear Led Zeppelin, you're going to be like, well, what is this? I don't know. It's got like 12 different parts to it. What happened to intro, chorus, verse, chorus,
I'm
verse,
confused.
End? Is this an artist issue? This, simplistic songs? Because at the end of the day,
yes.
If artists aren't writing these songs, then you've got no choice but to, if all artists went, okay, what we're going to do is, as a collective, right, in a utopic ideology, well, all music artists went, I am going to write complex songs. The simple stuff, that's gone. We're going to do nice, complex songs. If they turned around and did that, the industry would have to then be forced to kind of go down that road.
Bingo!
Stuff
and
out.
They would have to brainwash the masses into liking that stuff more.
Exactly. And I think which isn't actually that hard to do. Song exposure is the best way to brainwash people into liking your music. The more you hear a song, the more likely you are to like that song. That's where, Taylor Swift, who is a genius from this perspective, from a promotion perspective, fair play to her, because she's on every radio station, she's in every advert, she's, her songs are in films, in TV, they're everywhere. And that's a part of the machine of Taylor Swift, is that if she puts a song out, it's going to be exposed in as many places as possible. And if you want success in that way, if you want the monies, that's what you're going to have to do. And getting your songs on the radio and stuff like that, most artists don't put their songs on the radio anymore. And I'm like, why?
There you go. Are you listening, boys and girls?
Even if,
sell out, get your music on the radio, and off you go. You'll be famous like Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Well, obviously it depends on the level of success that you want. But if you want lots of people to listen to your music, It's kind of around, and then the counter argument that people always have is, well, who listens to the radio these days? And I'm like, even if you get 10 people listening to that song, I'd much rather have 10 fans than none.
It's all about the emails as well, right?
So, exactly. And 10 true fans. And again, this comes back to why I say followers are not your fan base. And if you look at the whole TikTok thing with record labels, they're signing TikTok artists and then they're dropping them like flies because their followers are not their fan base. And I don't know why major labels don't understand that, to be honest. But that's why I think that major labels are so bad at this early doors career A&R thing, the artist repertoire development thing.
It's not the forte, is it?
It's not, because all they've do is exploit from the underground. But what they've done is they've decimated the underground.
Yes.
Through the streaming sites. So, and through things like destroying alternative radio and things like that, because there's more money from them in that way. And now they're struggling to find new artists. Well, all you get is Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran. There's not a huge amount of choice in it. I looked at the chart. I looked at the 2024 charts, and the variance of artists was just comparing it to 1984. Which I was shocked about how similar. Firstly, how similar all the artists were, and how many were exactly the same artists within that chart.
Sad, isn't it? This is sad.
And it's just, it is, and this is what I'm saying, is that especially with young people coming into the industry, the casual listener, that's all they're being exposed to. So then, they hear like their old man, like you and me, put on, like Led Zeppelin or even Metallica or something like that. It's got something a bit more complex about it. They're like, I don't understand this music. I can't sort of fathom it, sort of thing. And it's like, I think artists need to bear some responsibility for this as well. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones writing the songs. They're the ones that are putting it out. And if they weren't so quick for success, if they didn't want immediate success, like I need it now, right now. I need to be Ed Sheeran tomorrow, sort of thing. Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. Then I think we would have better crafted songs, much better music, so in the mainstream. We can dig into the subgenres and all the rest of it if you like. I'm looking at this from a mainstream, broad perspective, from a 2,000 or 20,000 foot perspective, rather than if you listen to this obscure metal band that has one song has 20 different time signature variations in it or something like that. Yeah, that's a complex song. Or if you're looking at classical music and things like that, that's going to be complex songs. Broadly speaking, most casual listeners of music are listening to extremely simplified music. And I was just curious about how that's come to be and why that has happened and how that has kind of infiltrated the industry, and how as artists we could use that to go, okay, well, maybe we can have something, we can try to bring in some complexities to draw an audience, and then or maybe we could release something that's simplistic and then have other songs that are a bit more complex. So these songs are purely for marketing and to draw a crowd in, and these songs are for the fans, that once they get there, they can listen to it and go, oh, okay, actually, this stuff is really good and a bit more complex. I mean, I'm not saying like you're going to go from Taylor Swift to Tool, I'm not saying that kind of variance. What I'm saying is that, maybe what you should be doing as an artist is thinking along the lines of, okay, the stuff that we're putting out for free, that is purely for marketing. So if you're throwing it on Spotify, don't expect to make any money because you're not, okay? Maybe, I know it's heart-wrenching, but it's a fact.
I'm gonna give you my worldly wizardly advice when you're finished.
The wizardly advice. Okay. Maybe produce certain songs, nice, simple songs that go out onto Spotify, and then on your website, behind a paywall, the fans can access your exclusive content. And I've talked about this. I did a post recently about the 3 tiers.
Yes, in our
that artists should do. Thank you. And that kind of last tier is the exclusive stuff, and that's the stuff, the really good content. That's the stuff that you should sell. Some stuff is there to draw people in. Other stuff is there to get people to subscribe, and then all your really good stuff, people should pay for. And why not? Why shouldn't people pay for your efforts at the end of the day? So I'm ready to be hit up with the wizard's knowledge. Hit me with your knowledge bomb.
Here's what you should do, boys and girls, the wizardly worldly advice. Go out and support your local and underground bands, buy their merch, and that's enough fame and fortune they'll get. That's all you have to do. Go back to the old way of doing things. What Pete's suggesting and been doing works as well. But I really think what we're missing is the old school way of doing things, because then you get what you see, and then you go home and talk about it with your mates in the pub, in your house, whatever. And I think it's just the way to do it. Go out there and watch local bands, support local bands, and buy their fucking merch. I'm a massive advocate for it.
Bad Life Podcast!